are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by Prize Picks. What's up, everybody? Week 16. It's the big show. How we feeling? Noel's coming in hot with a super chat already, my man. Merry Christmas, Noel. Hope all is well, my man. Hope all is well. From Luxembourg and France. That's where you're at, man. Just traveling around. Good for you, man. Hope everyone's doing well in the chat. Bunch of familiar faces. Week 17. Normally, this is the time of the year where it starts to be like a little bit of a grind, but I still look forward to this Sunday morning show every single week. Just a glutton for punishment. It actually hasn't been much of a punishment, though, in terms of the lineups we've been building on this show. The last 2 weeks, we've gone absolutely crazy with our lineups. We were on a little bit of a cold streak. Not great. But the last 2 weeks, Sam Darnold, 5 touchdowns. Last week, Josh Allen going completely crazy in that game stack. Without the Amari Cooper air ball, that team actually would have done some real damage in the SPY. Ended up finishing top 15, I believe, which was pretty cool to build a show on this, or build a lineup on this show Sunday morning and compete in one of those mid-size field tournaments. But hopefully everyone is having a great start to their holiday season. A lot of good stuff to go through on this slate. Pretty excited about this slate from a tournament perspective as well. So hope everyone is doing well. Who we got here? Joey Donnelly's in here. What's up, Joey? How's it going? Joe Milk is in here. Ryan's in here. Ryan, I got a little bit of a laugh out of this one. I've closed the blinds and dimmed the lights for the slow jam. This one goes to 11. Good for you, my man. Good for you. What a slow jam. You know, I changed the song for the intro like one time. And can you guys see me on the screen? Or can you guys just hear me? This happened last week. I'm good? Okay, so it's just my YouTube stream says stream starting soon. Still. Thank God. I'm going to give it a refresh, though. Maybe it's just me. Me and technology, I suppose. But you guys see me. That's all that matters. I don't need to see me on the screen. Good stuff. There's a lot of stuff to work through today. There's a few things that seem very easy, though. Very easy. And it starts with our first poll. Who will be this week's highest owned player? Is it Jahmyr Gibbs or is it anyone else? I'm going to leave this poll up for 12 seconds. How are we feeling? We'll get to some news here in a second. Not a ton of weather stuff to go into for a late December show, but we'll touch on that quickly. We'll build the lineup at the end on DraftKings. That's going in the 5-5-5. One of these days, we're going to make $1 million on this stream. That'd be pretty cool. We'll go position by position, of course. All that good stuff. Walk through some of my favorite prize pick stuff. Most of my stuff in the props market is usually out by now. So if you're curious and getting a little bit more involved in the prize pick stuff and the prop bet stuff, get on the newsletter. All the picks that go out on all the videos earlier in the week are going out on the newsletter first. Get in there before those lines get bumped. What do we got here? Okay, so we're on the same page. Jahmyr Gibbs, highest owned player today. Yes. No David Montgomery, all the Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm on board with that, friends. I am totally on board with that. I'm actually going to probably stay a little narrow on our next one as well. I want to try and find what we think is the best quarterback next. Top quarterback play. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Are we paying up for either of those guys, or are we paying down for a Michael Penix Jr., Anthony Richardson, or other? Who else do you guys like at quarterback today? Gibbs is definitely RB1. Agree. What's up, Joe? How's it going, my man? Matt S. is in here. Josh Isaacson. Derek Hill. Johnny Mack. Witt's in here. What's up, Witt? A Bizzle. How we doing? Salt River Hillbillies. How we doing, brother? Good to see you guys. Prize Picks tanked yesterday with 2 injuries in the first quarter. Man, yeah, that's never fun. M. Thompson. What's up, my man? How we doing? Merry Christmas, Joe. Top quarterback plays today, friends. What are we thinking? Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Michael Penix Jr., Anthony Richardson. There's 2 very distinct paths as I was kind of doing some builds last night and this morning. And I think the decision point is, do you want to pay up for a Josh Allen or a Joe Burrow? Burrow in that stack, it's kind of like the safety blanket stack, right? It's like the Joe Burrow double. We've had it a lot this year. We've talked about it a lot this year. The pricing now on it, you better hope it goes nuclear like it has been, or you might be in a lot of trouble. Monty will indeed be missed. Will indeed be missed. A lot of Monty anytime touchdown stuff this year. That's been fun. Yeah. That Detroit team just extremely banged up. We'll see if they can battle through it, hold on for dear life. They've got some big division games here the next 3 weeks or so. I think someone said they can drop all the way to like 5th place, which is absolutely crazy. Mason Rudolph. Interesting. Burrow, Higgins, Chase stack all day. I mean, if you can make it work, my man, there actually is some decent value on this slate, so you can make it work. I'm just not sure if it's optimal for what is in the mid-range and for how strong running back is. That's my thought. And then, yeah, we got Josh Allen in a potential blow-up spot, but are we getting any pushback on the other side? We'll see. From like a ceiling perspective, we've only had a couple running backs all year that have approached like that 40-point ceiling projection. And we do have Jahmyr Gibbs there today at 7,500. Yeah. We'll get there. But yeah, I would expect Gibbs to be like 50 plus owned depending on field size. Yeah. Penix is coming out to party. Yeah, the Penix stuff is interesting to me because you would think if they were going to play it safe, they just would have continued to play Kirk Cousins, right? I actually don't think, I actually really love Bijan Robinson, we'll get to, but it's not because I think he's just going to get a ton of touches with Penix in there. I mean, he's just been getting peppered in general anyway, but you would think they'd want to get Penix some real reps. So I actually like that scenario. We'll get to it in a second, but Joe Burrow still leading the way from a quarterback perspective. 3+ touchdowns in 6 straight games, just staring at this box score here, which is crazy. Yeah. The problem is the other side, right? But if they continue to go through the air, might not matter. Might not matter. From a ceiling perspective, I think it is pretty clearly Allen and maybe Hurts ahead of Joe Burrow. But at 7,500, he's not priced out completely. I'm with you guys. From a value perspective, you are going to be led to like a 4,500 Michael Penix, 5,400 Anthony Richardson. This Anthony Richardson stuff is just really difficult for me, right? Like we haven't seen ineptitude at like a passer in years, right? Like we're staring at a guy that's like been worse as a passer than like Tim Tebow, which is completely insane. Like I get it. Hopefully we get our 40 yards on the ground. Hopefully we can get him in the box. It's just really tough from a ceiling perspective, I think, still, even at 5,400 on Richardson. So I don't know if I'll go there personally. I think if we're just staring at that price range, another guy I didn't put on this list, I think Caleb Williams still is very interesting. We talked about the injuries for Detroit. 5,500. I think that one's interesting. Weather looks fine in Chicago. Let's see if there's any other news that came through Twitter today that I should be aware of here before we get rolling. What else we got here? Braylon Allen, good to go. Wow, is that true? Josh Allen's been playing through a fractured left hand? Good Lord. That just came out 20 minutes ago. Left hand, though. So, interesting. Jameis is likely to be the emergency QB3 with that shoulder injury. Okay. Micah Parsons likely to play. I don't see a ton of other stuff that we need to be worried about this morning. The thing that's interesting, I was looking at the Tyreek stuff. It looks like he's going to be playing. That wrist injury still he's been battling through. He was expected to play. Tyrone Tracy, ankle expected to play. Pollard, ankle, that's a big one, expected to play. So all of these guys that were on like the questionable side look to be good to go. NBA prop drop hit last night. Yeah, people are sleeping on the NBA picks, my man. People are sleeping on the NBA picks. Appreciate you, Johnny. Yeah, I'm always really excited for football in some ways to get closer to wrapping up because that means we can get real deep into basketball. But in some ways, like having a little bit less time, less overthinking is usually positive this time of the year for the basketball stuff. Caleb, very interesting. Yeah, we'll get there. I think that, I mean, if we're just looking at the wide receivers, you're going to be falling into some DJ Moore stuff anyways, probably at 5,700 roughly, but we'll get there. Let's move over to another poll that I think is relatively straightforward, but curious what you guys think. So instead of number one running back play, let's just assume that we are all on the same page that Jahmyr Gibbs is the best running back play on the slate. Who is the number two running back play? Chase Brown, James Conner, Chuba Hubbard, Patrick Taylor Jr., Bijan Robinson, or other? What do we like at running back today? Pending Jahmyr Gibbs is in all of our lineups. He's already in the dummy lineup. Don't at me. This is not like one of those times where you guys are going to try and convince me to like not play Alvin Kamara. You guys remember that week? Shocking. I think we've come full circle on this, right? We're allowed to play Jahmyr Gibbs today, right? We can do that. He is on the thumbnail, so I think I'm obligated to put him in our team. I heard someone talking about Chicago's run defense, all that stuff. Guys, Chicago's been one of the worst defenses in the entire league since their bye, if not the worst. They've been getting beat through the air. They've been getting beat on the ground. It's a fantastic matchup. James Conner. One thing about James Conner that makes me a little bit nervous, and we've talked about him a lot, I haven't pulled the trigger on playing him as much as I should have this year. Maybe that's some bias that I should get over. The thing that, like, we're talking narratives that makes me nervous is all of this Trey McBride stuff, right? So Trey McBride has been just on an absolute tear all season, just hasn't scored touchdowns. We know this, right? Like, crazy historical tight end run if he was scoring just a reasonable amount of touchdowns. Kyler's talking about it. The rest of the Cardinals staff is talking about it. There's got to be a scenario here where that has to eventually hurt James Conner, right? From a touchdown perspective, if they're just like trying to force feed Trey McBride touches in the red zone, touches around the goal line just to try and get him in, they're throwing shovel passes to the guy, that has to negatively correlate with James Conner, right? So I get it. The role is great. The price is still reasonable for sure at 7,100, but it's no longer like a 6,100 James Conner where we're okay just with seeing the volume. We have some bias here because last week he scored 2 touchdowns. The week before he scored one through the air. If he doesn't get in the box and he's 30% owned, I mean, don't at me, but I actually think that James Conner makes like a reasonable fade today in tournaments, which is crazy to say against Carolina, right? We've been playing running backs against Carolina all season. And he is active in the passing game, all of that stuff. DeMarcado, all these guys are out. It's a smash spot from a volume perspective, don't get me wrong. I think at that range, like obviously Gibbs, Chase Brown at 7,700, Chuba Hubbard, Bijan Robinson. James Conner is the one that even just like staring at ownership and projection, like I think there's other smart ways we can leverage that, right? It feels a little bit over-owned to me. I'm completely with you, Johnny. Completely with you. Toby, I think that Achane also always sharp. We haven't seen that massive explosion from Achane, and we can count on like those 5-6 catches a game. Polls are like the rearview mirror. Items are closer than they appear. That's funny. Thoughts on some cheap running backs? Yeah, I think Taylor is probably the cheaper one. If we're just looking at like from a volume perspective, what makes the most sense? 5,200 for him. Just like seeing people stroll into the San Francisco running game and put up big performances would not be the first time we saw that. Not the typical prototype of player. 5,400 or 5,200 though. It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice. But Chuba Hubbard, another guy that I think we need to be considering every single week for the volume, still a little bit underpriced in that same game against Arizona, 6,800 for him. If we're just looking to like what he's been able to do for us, I mean, the passing game usage is something people don't talk about enough. I think with Chuba Hubbard, the yardage isn't really there, but if you can just tack on like 4 to 5 catches, that's why the projection ends up looking really, really strong. Bijan Robinson is the one that I think, I mean, people are talking about Bijan, but I still love it. I mean, especially with the Penix stuff. If we're staring at Bijan Robinson at like 15%, 8,100, I know he's expensive. but the usage has been completely crazy. 100 yards from scrimmage in 8 of the past 9 games. The prop stuff on Bijan has been just like an absolute print fast for weeks. But I still think it's a pretty good matchup. This Giants team has been one we've been targeting on the ground all season. The Bijan overs was something that I was pretty heavy on early this week. Yeah. Madison and 4 for cheap running backs. Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about the Raiders running backs. I don't think anyone would be shocked to see like Amir Abdullah have like a big game through the air. They're a team that you typically would target through the air with running backs, even though Jacksonville's been pretty bad everywhere. So I get the Madison stuff at 5,100. It projects pretty well. I don't know if it's necessary. I think I still prefer some of these other guys a little bit more. It's the opportunity cost every single week at running back, right? If you're trying to back into one of these cheaper guys, you're not playing one of these 6,500 to like 7,500 running backs that are just absolute smash plays, right? So let's keep this moving. We'll talk through running back as we go, but I think that those are the guys that I'm the most focused on. We don't need to talk about Jahmyr Gibbs. He's the best play on the slate. I guess Chase Brown, let's not go over him like as quickly. Yeah, the target share is great. There's really no other competition there. He's been the best player at the position outside of Saquon Barkley most of the season, right? So it's a really good matchup. All of these things, 9-point favorites at home. No Jameis Winston. That would have been a pretty fun game, honestly. If we had some Jameis stuff, the pace would have been. I think that would have been one of the most enticing games on the entire slate. Not as excited about it without Jameis back there. Let's talk about wide receiver, but start at the elite side wide receiver. Do we have the salary to get to these guys? I'm not sure, but if we were to be targeting one of these top elite wide receivers, who is it? Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown. In order to place your vote, if you're here for the first time, hit that subscribe button, or you will not be able to type in the chat. And then exclamation point vote, space the number. You'll see some of the OGs in the chat. We've got it down at this point, week 16. We do this every Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern time, position by position on DraftKings, build a lineup for the Millie Maker at the end, the 555 Millie. One of these days, we're going to take this thing down on stream, and that'll probably be my last stream ever. We might as well go out on top. No, I don't know if I could do that. I have too much fun on these Sunday shows. Amon-Ra all day. Okay, interesting. Jamar Chase, 8,500. Don't open the box scores for Jamar Chase. It's some absolutely wild stuff. The floor seems to be like 85 yards recently. The touchdowns are there. The targets are there. The red zone targets. The absolute explosion potential. Obviously, he's going for the Triple Crown. Lots of love about Jamar Chase outside of price. 8,500 for him. Can we fit him in there? Or do we want to target one of these other guys? Bengals are going to need it. Bengals are not eliminated yet, which is crazy. They'd be a scary playoff team with that type of firepower. We'll see. Massive favorites in this one again. 8,500 Jamar Chase. Tying a bow kind of on running back. I don't really like a lot of the leverage. That's kind of been a common theme for us. I think the only way that it makes any sort of sense to get off the board at running back is probably just searching for some ceiling at low ownership, and it's probably Saquon. 8,300 for him. Really sucks to spend up for, but a sub 5% Saquon. It's tough to not get on board with that in tournaments. The Sun God smashes and Gibbs doesn't blow up. Maybe. I more often than not, I want to play the Sun God in like a really back and forth game, right? So is this a situation where this Detroit defense is so banged up that all the Caleb Williams stuff does go well? So I think that Amon-Ra probably makes the most sense as bringbacks in Caleb stacks to me. I don't know if I really like the one-off stuff because then you're really going to back into a lot of this chalk on Chicago anyway, right? That could happen. The Gibbs and Amon-Ra together, that's where a lot of this usage is going to come through. the correlation stuff even before Montgomery went down for Gibbs and Amon-Ra still looks pretty good. These type of players are still going to be ones you want in these higher scoring games anyways, with the way they're being peppered with targets. Not a lot of love for Justin Jefferson. That's kind of interesting. Justin Jefferson at like 2% at Seattle. Kind of interesting. He's one of those higher like leverage ceiling guys that makes sense. I think Amon-Ra you could put in that category too. Didn't realize he's at like 2% right now. It's just tough to get to these guys. It's tough to make the lineups look strong in like any of the sim stuff that you're looking at, any of the optimizer stuff that you're looking at. You're just dropping a lot of projection by moving to some of these elite wide receivers over some of some of the great plays we have at running back. You can't have it all, right? And especially if you're trying to get Trey McBride on some teams, it's very difficult to get to some of these elite wide receivers today. Chase by a mile for me. Won't play much at all. Yeah, I think so. Philly's an interesting one. Like the A.J. Brown stuff, no one wants to play A.J. Brown. I get it. It's the volume. But, I mean, it's been like 2 or 3 years now that just these Philly wide receivers, no one wants to play them. They have very high ceilings, very difficult for them to completely realize that ceiling unless they're extremely efficient, which is a little bit harder to project than someone that we can project a ton of volume for. Does that make sense? Even in that game, we're looking at like Terry McLaurin in an absolutely horrific matchup, but 7,300 for him, 1% owned. There's some leverage in that game in general, right? Like, what I don't love is that game's at 1 p.m. That would have been like the late swap game. But the fact that it's at 1 p.m. makes it a little bit more difficult. What I like to do a little bit more, if I'm like focused on like the late swap stuff, is I would like to play like mid-range to cheaper guys to try and get some information on like some of the leverage spots early. Because then you know if you can chalk up your lineup for the rest of the slate at 4 p.m., right? Or if you have to continue to try and get a little bit more contrarian, you don't really learn much by playing just a ton of chalk at 1 p.m. Because then you're still kind of holding hands with the rest of the field that's waiting for whatever's coming, right? So, like, obviously, we'll have all of the information with the Detroit guys at 1 p.m. What do we have in terms of leverage, though? So if we don't have Philly, what do we have? Tyreek Hill, and that stuff looks pretty good. All the Minnesota guys look pretty good for leverage. Brock Bowers over McBride looks interesting. So there are some ways that we can pivot later on. No one's playing Josh Allen at 8,700. So that's an interesting route if you wanted to go that route. We'll get there though. Okay, let's move over to, again, this is the poll every single week where the money is made and lost, right? Top non-elite wide receiver play. Malik Neighbors, DJ Moore, Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, Juwan Jennings, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, or other. What do we think about this tier of wide receiver? Again, if they made it on a poll, this is roughly where my player pool is at this time of the week. I try and narrow it down as much as possible to where if you were just watching the show and going through the polls, you would see at least the guys that I'm the most focused on at each position. And then we'll kind of battle it out together in the polls to see who we like the best. Gibbs, fade Amon-Ra, maybe. Thoughts on Metcalf JSN without Geno? I think it's fine, Joey. Yeah. So JSN is kind of like the blitz beater there, right? Like if there's going to be a lot of blitzing, which the Vikings defense will be blitzing the entire game, they tend to get really shredded by these slot receivers, like some of the stuff that we'll see from JSN against those coverages. I really like it from a volume perspective, but the Vikings have also been beat on the outside a little bit more recently too. And we have all the narratives in the entire world with DK Metcalf, right? They're saying they need to get him more involved. They plan to do so. So there's squeaky wheel here for DK, and his price is just fantastic, right? The DK Metcalf price of 5,500 is completely egregious. This Vikings defense, as strong as it is, sometimes you just have to bet on talent, volume, and price. So I'm on board with the DK stuff, but I do really like the JSN stuff as well for a little bit more expensive, better matchup stuff if you're trying to break ties, less narrative stuff, right? So that's the debacle we have. So I think playing them both together is actually not the worst idea. Rain in Seattle, not concerning. I don't really care too much about rain. personally. We're focused on wind typically, or like extremely cold weather when we're talking about weather. But I'll take a look to see if there's any wind stuff that's popping. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. Very wet day in Seattle. Not a ton of wind though. Yeah, honestly, I'm just like looking through. I don't really see any game that we need to be concerned about for cold, wind, any of that stuff today. We have some gusts in Detroit at Chicago, but nothing crazy. Yeah, I don't, as crazy as that sounds, like end of December, not really any weather implications on the slate today. Malik Neighbors. Okay. So you're betting on what is probably a third string quarterback on any other team in the league in Drew Lock, but the volume, it's really difficult to, I mean, argue against the volume that he's seeing, right? So I'm totally okay with the Malik Neighbors stuff. If he's going to continue to get double digit targets every single week, I think the floor is extremely high. I think you just have to ask yourself what the ceiling is for Malik Neighbors, because he's not free. 6,100, he's not free. It's still a really good game environment. If you think that he's like, I mean, if you think this game could shoot out, I'm totally fine with Malik Neighbors. I don't know if I love Malik Neighbors as a one-off at that price. Malik Neighbors on Penix Jr. teams, totally get it. Totally get it. He's still probably the best volume play on the entire board. You could probably make an argument at that same price range for Brian Thomas Jr. as like the best volume play on the board. But yeah, both of them clear alphas, terrible quarterback play. But volume is king, even at wide receiver. We talk about it at running back, but volume is absolutely king. The price is still great. In terms of like Brian Thomas Jr., the one thing that I really like about that is no Max Crosby on the other side. So we might get like this weird Jacksonville Raiders game that ends up shooting out like two really bad teams that just can't stop each other. We've seen that time and time again too. That I could see both sides of it, right? Either both offenses are so bad that they still can't get it going, or like on the bull case, what's really nice about this game is we have very condensed target shares on both sides and very bad defenses on both sides, right? So we back into some Jacoby Myers stuff at 5,800. We back into some Brian Thomas stuff at 6,300. And like that mid range just like looks pretty good with those guys together. William's a new subscriber. He likes Jacoby. Love it, man. Welcome in, by the way. Welcome in. Who else is new in the chat? Who's been with us for like the last like 3-4 weeks, something like that? We don't win every single week. That much I can tell you. The last 2 weeks have been really good on the team that we've built on at the end of the show. But appreciate the new people in the chat. If you came from Instagram, let me know. I'm always curious about that. Trying to get more people from the Instagram streets that are just probably scrolling on their For You page over to the YouTube streams on Sunday mornings. That's the goal, right? You guys are the ones that I'm the most. I'm trying to give you guys the most value possible, right? It's impossible to do that in a 60-second video. And don't ever go to my comments on Instagram or TikTok. It might be the worst place on earth. It actively puts me in a terrible mood just reading those comments. I should not read the comments. I should probably take my own medicine there. Neighbors 82 yards against the Ravens. He's going to cook this week. I mean, Neighbors is a fantastic play. I don't want anyone to leave this show thinking I'm not on Neighbors. He's a great play. He's literally anyone that you see that makes it to a poll. Like I said, these are guys I'm strongly considering on like my main team. All right, what else we got here? DJ Moore. We should talk about these Bears wide receivers, right? It never feels great. Never feels great. DJ Moore, 5,700 against Detroit. This defense that's so banged up. The volume has been fantastic for DJ Moore for 5 weeks now. He hasn't had that explosion spot over the last couple, but the ceiling is there with DK Moore, right? So if there was a spot that we really wanted to kind of hope that Chicago gets right, it's against this banged up Detroit defense in a game where Detroit really needs to win, but also like they're just extremely shorthanded, right? At home, like pretty good weather, all those things. We should see a lot of passing because regardless of what's happening with Detroit, and injuries, they're going to score points. So 5,700 for DJ Moore, he's just drastically underpriced, right? Looking at like him and Neighbors together, both of those guys, like from a volume perspective, just it's not surprising to see them at the ownership spot that they're at. So I do really like it. Trey and Brock with Gibbs. You can make that work. You can make that work. Not one vote for Jacoby Myers in here. Not one vote for Jacoby Myers. Interesting. Volume is king. Stool Pigeon DFS. What a username. What's up, man? I see you. I see you. What else we need to talk about on this list? Juwan Jennings. On the list of players I haven't played enough of this year, he's got to be on it. He's got to be on it. Him and Brock Purdy together, I mean, the volume is great. The ceiling, it has kind of come through touchdowns. Like, I don't think he's one game over 100 yards this year. So I would prefer probably to play him in games where I think there's going to be a lot of points. I am a little bit concerned that there's not going to be a ton of pace in this game. So San Francisco at Miami, there are some pieces. So I think it's one-offs in this game regardless. We mentioned from a leverage perspective, I think Tyreek is interesting at 6,900. I have a little bit more interested in that probably than Juwan Jennings, but he's still, like I said, maybe I have some bias there because I've missed out on some of the Juwan Jennings stuff this year. I prefer DJ Moore. Like in a vacuum, I still prefer DJ Moore than Juwan Jennings, but it's very close. It's very close. Debo sneaky too. Yeah, I don't think I can do the Debo stuff. Something just doesn't seem right about him. I could be wrong. FBR's from IG. Let's go, man. Welcome in. Higher volume game with Miami. Maybe. Am I the only one that's worried about pace in that game? Like the games that I'm targeting for like a lot of plays, Jacksonville, like that Jacksonville and Raiders game still to me looks to be one of the best ones on the slate. And then Detroit and Chicago. I still would have liked the Cleveland Cincinnati game more if Jameis was in it. We talked about that. This Philly and Washington game is really great for pace as well. The pricing is just tough in that game. And then usually when I'm trying to find efficiency, I'm trying to find some situations where we really like the offensive line over the D line. That again is really just a small list this week. It's probably just the Bills. Patriots D line can't get pressure on anyone. Bills offensive line has been great. In terms of like some situations that I'm worried about, like Patriots offensive line against the Bills, that's scary. I still think that like this Seahawks offensive line has been pretty bad too. So like that's my big concern with like DK and JSN. It's probably a bull signal for JSN and a bear signal for DK. Just don't know if there's gonna be a ton of time. We know the Vikings are gonna bring pressure, and the Seahawks offensive line has been absolutely horrible. The one that's interesting to me is like the Giants offensive line, like one of the worst in the entire league, but the Falcons D line doesn't bring pressure anyway. So I don't have any real concerns there for like Malik Neighbors or anything like that. A couple guys we haven't talked about. What about like Calvin Ridley? His price still, like, it just stares me in the face all the time. The Rudolph stuff, like I heard some people talking about like, oh, like none of that like volume that we were seeing, those deep targets matter for Calvin Ridley because different quarterback. He's just leaving so many unrealized air yards on the field every single week. And you can say that about Rudolph in general, that he will throw the deep ball. So I think 5,700 for Ridley is interesting. I think he's kind of turning into like a little bit more of like a popular GPP play than I would like. But I do like the Ridley stuff. Some other guys that I haven't heard anyone talk about. Is anyone going to play Cooper Kupp today? Coming off a 0. I think that Rams game is interesting. We like Puka, of course, but 6,500 for Cooper Kupp against the Jets. Like that is one of the games that I think I should have a little bit more interest in, right? Than we've like kind of talked about. Not a lot of like high totals, but like the games that I'm the most interested. I think the Detroit and Chicago game looks really good from a game stack perspective, but this LA and New York Jets game really looks good too. Like if we're just looking at like the Puka stuff, he's one of the guys that we've been all over in the props market. Talk about someone that's like been just printing money in overs. Puka's been right there with us with like the Bijan stuff, which has been cool. The routes in general look really good. Not worried about like Sauce Gardner or anything like that on the other side. But I do really like it. And I think that like the Puka And I think the Puka and Cup stuff could actually go under owned today. So like Stafford in play, Stafford doubles. What do we think about Stafford doubles today? Like low owned Stafford doubles bring back with like Devontae Adams. By the way, you guys were not happy about my Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson stack idea last week. I get lots of stuff wrong every single week. That was one of the things that we were on though. So hopefully you guys ended up playing it. We didn't have it on our main team. We ended up stacking up the Bills and Lions game. But the Aaron Rodgers stuff was very clear last week. Maybe not like 40 yards on the ground for Aaron Rodgers clear, but it looked pretty good. Massive target shares, very condensed offenses. That's where we want to be, friends. It's where we want to be. Rest in peace to your running back. That is the problem. That is the problem. If you're going to play the Stafford double, it's very expensive, right? So maybe we back into that game with some mini stacks. I'd be okay with that. I'm open to it. What else do we got here that we haven't chatted about so far? If you didn't want to go with DJ Moore, I still think Keenan Allen for a little bit cheaper makes some sense. Like both of those guys have to be in play today. There's so many good wide receiver plays today. That's the thing that's not great. Marvin Harrison Jr. is popping a little bit for leverage just with everyone playing McBride or Connor. And the volume's still been pretty good. But then you're really betting on Kyler. Roma Doomsday, no one's going to play Roma Doomsday if everyone's just going to play these other Chicago guys. Rome's the one getting the deep targets downfield, but also like they haven't been connecting most of the year on that sort of thing. So it's the Rome stuff I've been probably chasing more than I should, honestly. More than I should. So quick recap. I think at quarterback, if you're paying down, it probably is like Michael Penix. If you're paying up, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. But I do want to tie that to my stacks. Running back, very straightforward. It's Jahmyr Gibbs. I still think Chase Brown is worth this price point, even though he's significantly more expensive. It's warranted at 7,700. And then you're kind of splitting hairs with like that last guy between like James Conner, Bijan, and Chuba. You could pay down if you really wanted to for like a Patrick Taylor. I don't know if you should though. I think I do want to spend some salary there. That's why we kind of land on like the Brian Thomas Jr., Jacoby Myers, Malik Neighbors tier at wide receiver because it's kind of necessary. It's very difficult to get up to Jamar Chase unless you're willing to give up some of those running backs today. Let's close this one out and move to tight end, and then we'll get into building a team here shortly. Top tight end play today. Trey McBride, Jonnu Smith, Brenton Strange, Hunter Henry, Brock Bowers, or other. What do we like at tight end? Kind of a fun tight end slate, actually. If there's such a thing. What do we like, friends? Brenton Strange. Everyone wants to pay down a tight end. I don't blame you. 3,500 for him. Pretty nice. We know where the targets are going to go. The more I look at it, that game just like, it looks really good from a stacking perspective, right? Really cheap target shares there. Allows you to build in a lot of running back structure around it. But that's not going to be that unique, right? I will say we didn't talk enough. We talked a little bit about the Jet stuff on how that went right. I wish we would have talked a little bit more about Brian Thomas Jr. last week on the stream. That was my bad. I think he was on the list, but we didn't talk about him enough. 12 targets last week for Strange. We like that. All of these guys out, right? Like Kirk, Davis, Ingram. So Mac Jones at quarterback. Never a fun ride, but he has looked reasonable the last couple weeks and serviceable at least for a $3,500 tight end with that type of target share. And then it's Trey McBride if you want to go the other direction. Like I did take an anytime touchdown, I believe, already for him. So I think this is the week. I think this is the week they force feed him at least one. 6,200. You're not getting much of a price discount there because of how good he has been outside of the touchdowns even. Like that's still Travis Kelce pricing, right? For him. Strange McBride double tight end. I don't hate that. I don't hate that. If we're just staring at Trey McBride at 6,200, I know we always say this, but 6,200 Trey McBride, I mean, he's right there with these wide receivers at that price. So you're looking at like Brock Bowers is like the other guy from a ceiling perspective, but like around him, you're looking at like Drake London, Brian Thomas, of course. You're looking at like Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, Cooper Kupp for a little bit more expensive. So like it's still like a decent range. A little bit cheaper, you can go like JSN, Juwan Jennings. So like I wouldn't say he like runs away with the pricing tier, but he is totally fine in that range, right? Like so I think the double tight end is in play if you were already going to play a wide receiver in the flex, but if you're probably playing 3 running backs, like most of my builds have been, it still is going to project a lot better probably. Not TD dependent with 12 targets. Yeah, fair. All right, let's get to a fun poll. Favorite game stack. What do we want to play today? This is it's strongly going to influence what we do with our roster here in the 555 milli on DraftKings. Detroit at Chicago, Arizona at Carolina, New England at Buffalo, LA at New York Jets, Cleveland at Cincy, Philly at Washington, San Francisco at Miami, or other. What do we like at game stacks? Favorite game stacks. Where do we want to focus our roster on here, friends? What do we think? Do we go super gross Jacksonville at Las Vegas? Do we get into something a little bit more comfortable? Chicago at Detroit? There's some routes here. Exclamation point, vote, space the number to place your vote. If you're here for the first time, hit that subscribe button or you will not be able to talk in the chat. That's how we fight the bots, all that good stuff. I'll say this as well before we get into the roster build. If you haven't tried out Prize Picks yet, before Christmas, a very good time to do it. They don't always have those free squares, but they do have a Jokic over half a point. So if you haven't played on Prize Picks yet, use code HOLKA You'll get an instant $50 deposit bonus after you play your first $5 lineup, but also you'll get an automatic win basically with that first play, Jokic over half a point on Christmas Day. So really good time to jump in there and try out Prize Picks for the first time if you guys haven't done it already. You guys know that's kind of where my focus is most of the week. I think the props market is not only very fun, but very beatable still. If you're focusing on correlation, I'm looking at these like actual lineups, right? I'm trying to build in as much correlation as possible. I'm not scared to play an alt line. I know that's like taboo in like the betting world. You play these alt lines, but if we're really focusing on building correlation, focusing on like a lot of really good matchups, I'll take an alt line here. If you're trying to get to like a 4 and 5 out of 5 type of thing to 3 to 5x your money, I think that's totally fine. Think about what we're doing in DFS here. A lot of times, like we'll get in the top 20% of a tournament and we're going to 1.5x our money. You can double up your money, triple up your money in very safe and thoughtful ways by using alt lines in the prop market. That's my pitch. That's what we kind of focus on a lot more in VIP as well, just trying to double and triple up our money as consistently as possible. I know someone was talking about the NBA stuff in the chat. We did hit an NBA yesterday, which was great. But all the stuff for the most part in VIP is going to be 2 and 3x stuff that I feel really good about. And I spend a lot of time kind of building out those to be as thoughtful as possible. So if you're in the chat, the pinned comment will get you a free 7 days in VIP. Check it out. See if it's for you. You can cancel at any time and get all of your money back, basically. So that's my pitch. And if you're going to do it, check it out on Prize Picks. Kind of the easiest place to grab some of those alt lines, in my opinion, and some of the best multipliers for it. There's other apps too where you can adjust lines, but a lot of times your multiplier will go down a lot more than it does on Prize Picks, in my experience. VIP is where there's a link in the description, also a link at the top of the chat. You can get it on email, you can get it on text, you can get it on Winnable is the app that I'm using, and Discord as well. So there's a million different ways you can get it. What's cool for me is I can post it in one spot and then it sprays across wherever you want your notifications to go. Free 7 days. Get in there. Check out VIP. What do we got here for the poll? Detroit at Chicago. We got some others in the chat as well. Interesting. Caleb, cheap doubles with Gibbs bring back. That might be the way. You guys realize we got to keep the streak going, right? We got to keep the streak going. Back-to-back weeks where we've cashed. Really nice cash last week as well. The Darnold 5-touchdown game. We backed into all the Josh Allen stuff last week. DFS is easy, right? Let's do it again. What are we going to do it with, though? Detroit at Chicago leading the way. Detroit at Chicago leading the way. Did I not put the Raiders game on this? Is that the others? Oh my God. I might have to restart this poll because that's like the one that I'm like really considering. Why did I not put that on here? Am I crazy? Low total, I suppose. So I'm just going to say that the others are probably for the Raiders Jacksonville game. We probably don't want to stack that one up completely anyways in terms of like adding the quarterback. So I guess that's fine. So let's start with Detroit. Let's start with Detroit and Chicago. We're going to have to find a way to make this a little bit more unique though. So let's run this quickly. Actually, let's just jump in and see what happens. So I'm going to throw two things on the roster from starting position, just to give us an idea of kind of where we're at. I'm going to throw three things. So I'll throw a defense on there too to start. What do we think about this? Point. Caleb Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Raiders defense. If we're not playing this Jacksonville and Las Vegas game, 2,700 for Raiders feels pretty good. I don't really want to pay up for like Cincy or Buffalo, but those are the ones that most people are probably going to play this week at defense. I don't love defense in general this week. I'll say that. So like 3,600, it feels rough for Buffalo. But if we don't have any access to that game, we just hope that it goes wrong. I could see it. I'm open to moving up at defense, but let's leave it at Raiders for now. Jahmyr Gibbs, like I said, still think is the best play on the slate. Feel really good about that. I think we need to be thoughtful about what we're doing here from a stacking perspective. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, going to be the pieces that most people are going to play. Right? Amon-Ra St. Brown at 7,900. Very expensive, but no one's playing it. Like if we're going to just target this game, highest total on the slate by a good amount, right? Bears have been a little bit better at home, which is good. We obviously have the injuries to worry about, I guess, to help this be a nice back and forth affair. Hopefully we don't get destroyed by this Chicago stuff. Wouldn't be the first time. What's interesting from a tournament perspective was we're kind of staring at maybe Amon-Ra super low ownership. One guy we haven't talked about at all is Sam Laporta. If we wanted to build in, I always, if I can, like to build in some correlation with the stack that I'm trying to build out, right? Because a high total game, like we do in theory, still want to get our tight end in high total games. We're getting some low ownership there, all those things, right? So the Laporta stuff I think is kind of interesting in tournaments. Like where is that? That ownership is, I haven't heard one person talk about Laporta. 5% roughly for him in this game. Like the Bears have been giving it up to tight ends. Hawkinson went nuts. Kittle went nuts. He didn't really do much last time these two teams played in terms of catches, 3 catches, but did score 2 touchdowns. What do we think about Laporta? At 4,700 though, as like a place to spend salary, I don't hate it. Strange at tight end. Yeah, we could obviously do that. I'm just trying to figure out like ways to make this team different. Because the Caleb stuff is going to be owned. DJ Moore obviously is going to be the highest owned player in this game, but for good reason. Those are less like DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are like the ones that make the most sense on the Chicago side for sure. And then from a volume perspective, like no Carlton Davis. I mean, they're kind of similar. Like they give up a ton of slot to receivers, or they give up a ton of like reception and volume to slot receivers. So I actually don't mind the double here. I just think we have to find a couple pieces that people are not going to play. So what happens if we put in DJ Moore here and we put in Keenan Allen? We've already got Gibbs. I'm trying to think like what is the most like negative correlation on Gibbs? Probably is Laporta. So even though I was kind of interested in that before, Strange is going to be the chalk. I don't want to build in too much here though. Like when we're talking through like leverage at wide receiver, we still need to find a little bit. We still need to find something here. So I think what we could do on this roster, if we really wanted to get weird, is swap the Amon-Ra for Gibbs stuff, or we just try and make Amon-Ra work on this team, which is really going to hurt at running back. I'm open to all scenarios. Strange obviously makes some sense. As a one-off, it's not going to... We're going to need this salary if we want to get up to like another big piece in that game, or if we want to get up to like a really strong spot. In terms of like players that I think are going to be lower owned than they should, though, I'm trying to like piece together like what is the leverage spot here. I think the Calvin Ridley stuff is kind of interesting at 5,700. I wish he was. I mean, now he's approaching double digits in ownership, though. I wasn't expecting that. Madison. We could go really cheap at running back. We could. Strange at tight end. No one's talking about like Tyrone Tracy at 5,500. Madison. Fading like Chase Brown and James Conner, somewhat unique. They're going to be absolutely piled on. So I think we should use that salary in a smart way. I still really like the idea of the Seattle wide receivers too, but I don't think they're going to fit on this build. We could, in theory, get off of like a DJ Moore and move to a Roma Doomsday. I guess think if we're going to play Caleb, it's for this type of back and forth, right? But we're playing the ceiling option here, so I think we need to try and make Amon-Ra work. The more I look at this, I think we need to try and make Amon-Ra work. And that gives us a decently different type of build. Because I don't think, like, I mean, no one's paying up for Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra is probably the top leverage play on the slate if this ownership holds. He's going to be like 2%. So I think that's kind of nice. Leads the team in yards per out run against cover 3. We know the Bears will play a lot of cover 3. They did shut down Jefferson at times. But I think this is an interesting leverage spot. Chicago has been pretty good against lead wide receivers, but like I said, they've just not been like great across the board for the last like 4 or 5 weeks. So both of them together, I think if we can capture hopefully the majority of the points for Detroit with Gibbs and with Amon-Ra, and then we get some decent pushback from Chicago at a cheap price point. I guess like the idea of Caleb, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen together is so cheap that it allows us still to kind of back into this type of roster construction, right? So then we're trying to figure out what to do at running back the rest of the way. Taylor stands out to me if we're trying to go cheaper. I think he's my favorite cheap option at 5,200. It doesn't feel great. I guess Madison versus Patrick Taylor is an interesting thought experiment. I'm just concerned that, well, what do we think we're going to get for volume for Patrick Taylor? What do the projections say for that? People that are a lot smarter than me diving into some of the specifics here. So if we can get like 12 carries and like 3 catches or so, that's still not great. Madison, we just have a higher touch floor for sure. Higher touch floor for sure. I think we got to do something like a little bit off the board here with one of these 2 slots remaining now. What is like one of the highest leverage things we can do in one of these slots? Is it backing into something a little bit cheaper maybe? Like we're already fading a ton at running back with this build, right? We're fading Bijan, we're fading Connor, we're fading Chase Brown, we're fading Chuba Hubbard. So like where's the leverage of those players where we can benefit the most, right? So Connor and Hubbard together, there's not a ton of leverage we had in that game. Bijan Robinson in Atlanta, he's not going to be owned enough to like really have to leverage that spot. Malik Neighbors. So how do we leverage Malik Neighbors? I think is one of these main things that we should be focusing on with like a lower ownership play here. It's probably like a Tyrone Tracy, right? Tracy's at a nice price point for like about, 16 touches roughly. Am I crazy? What do you guys think about Tracy at running to leverage Neighbors? Questionable. What do we got for injury here? Ankle. Expected to play. Limited sessions all week. Formally cleared to play. Okay. What do we think here? Am I crazy for thinking this through? Because in a roster like this, we're betting on like the one game. We still have some of the higher ceiling plays on the slate. We have a lot of chalk. Raiders chalk, Strange chalk. And then we have to think about what other plays do we need to go wrong on this slate for us to benefit the most. And maybe the Neighbors thing doesn't matter as much because he's going to get there on volume, not touchdowns anyways. But if this game gets a little bit more gross and Tracy, like, the thing that makes me nervous is how much Singletary played last week. And he stole a touchdown. But the matchup's not horrible. Atlanta gives it up to running backs. He's a massive underdog, though, on the road. Am I crazy? Not on Tracy, Jake says. Not on Tracy. Singletary with Tracy. Nobody's playing Saquon. I don't think we could fit Saquon. Unless we took out Amon-Ra. That would make this team unique. As a thought experiment, let's see what happens if we do something like that. I don't hate that, actually. So we got Gibbs and Saquon together. That's kind of interesting. Is there anything more in this Detroit side of the ball that we want to play? What does Jameson Williams look like? 5,500 for JMO. I like playing him at home better typically. But if we're not playing Amon-Ra, actually, wait. You guys remember how crazy Addison went in that game where the Bears shut down Justin Jefferson? Okay. I actually don't mind where we're at right now. I don't mind this direction we're taking this. Okay, so let's Oh, I'm literally looking at the wrong game. No, I'm not. Yeah, I think that I still distinctly remember Addison going crazy against the Bears. That happened. I'm not imagining that. Jameson Williams. No one's going to play him after last week. Didn't really do much when these teams played each other last time. Yeah, I mean, this Chicago team is giving it up, though. They gave up 4 for 150 to Christian Watson. That's kind of the same archetype. Obviously, Jordan Addison went nuts. What do we think about JMO? Another 1% player in this game in like the same range as like people playing Jacoby Myers, people playing like DK Metcalf. Like those guys obviously project a lot better, but the ceiling is not that much different. Jameson come back with Ridley. Would that fit? Okay, I've talked myself into JMO on this team, I think. So we got Caleb Williams to DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, bringing it back with Gibbs and Williams. So I think that captures like a really high scoring game. We got Saquon Barkley, who, I mean, outside of maybe Amon-Ra, like probably the best leverage option on the slate. If we're not playing any of these other running backs, we're not playing Chase Brown, we're not playing James Conner, we're not playing Chuba Hubbard, we have to have someone there at running back that really differentiates us. And I think Saquon is the play. So then 6K coming back, we can get a JSN in there if we want. We talked about that being a good spot for JSN. At 6K, what would we want to do here? JSN, Juwan Jennings, we could play. We could play Jacoby Myers. We could play Calvin Ridley. There's a million directions we could take this last play. We could play the double tight end with McBride. No, we cannot. 6,200. We have to go down to defense. What do we like at defense? Do we like anything else at defense today that's cheaper? Dolphins defense. 49ers offensive line has not been good. That only saves us 100 though. No, that saves us nothing. We're at 2,700 right now at defense. Giants defense, gross. We could do that. On the same kind of trajectory, like what hurts neighbors, it's probably like a couple defensive touchdowns randomly against Penix. That'd be crazy. Play it, I guess, playing the defense against a rookie quarterback, I've heard worse ideas. We are talking about the Giants defense, though. That would get us to McBride, though, which is kind of interesting. Something like this. That would also get us Brian Thomas Jr. if we wanted it. So like a mini stack basically with Strange and Brian Thomas Jr. Oh, that's tough. That is really tough. In a vacuum, that seems like the play in that range. If we're trying to, I think we're trying to leverage. I mean, we could just play neighbors. Could just play neighbors. It's a tough range. Giants, then Trey. Trey McBride's getting in the end zone, right? Am I crazy? Brian Thomas is ruled out? What? Oh, wrong one. Oh, wrong Robinson. Thank you. I did click wrong. That can happen. Clicking is hard. Clicking is hard. Trey McBride is getting in the end zone. This Panthers defense is absolutely horrendous. We need some leverage. We need a path to beating the James Conner people. Strange and McBride together. I don't think we've done this all year. How do we feel about this? Should we be just playing Strange and Brian Thomas Jr. together? Something about just like the Jacksonville thing just ruins me. I did the same thing with Brian Thomas Jr. last week. I like couldn't actually pull the trigger when it came down to it. 6,300 for him. The targets have been there. There's still Mac Jones targets, but he went absolutely crazy last week against the Jets. We're backing into the ownership is basically the same for all these guys, right? Thomas, Neighbors, McBride, they're all about 20 to 22%. McBride has only scored one TD and was a rushing TD. Yeah, no, I mean, if there was a week for him to do it, it's probably this week. But like, also, if we're trying to think broad picture, what have I fallen trap to before? It's like the Travis Kelce play. We have to really think about this last slot. We would have to obviously downgrade a defense. But like McBride versus Calvin Ridley shouldn't be that much of a decision, right? I think if Calvin Ridley would have been like 5% owned, he would make more sense. He's like just at that ownership spot where he's like not the best leverage play on the slate, you know? Or we just jam in Marvin Harrison Jr. there. He just hasn't had the yardage ceiling. That's difficult for me. We can't get up to like a Tyreek type of leverage. We've already got a decent amount of leverage with Jamison Williams. We can't get up to Cooper Kupp. We can't get into like a Devontae Adams. So I think it's really between like those few guys. It's like McBride, Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr. And that's if we're willing to go down to Giants D, which I don't hate against the rookie quarterback that everyone wants to play, right? So I think like we're playing Caleb Williams. Giants D has to stay, I think, just because of where the ownership is for Michael Penix Jr. So I think that, I mean, I think that's been like something we've done well this year in general is just playing the defense against a chalk sheep quarterback. You can vault the field pretty quickly just if that one thing goes right. Something about McBride this week, though, just has my heart, but I've been burned before. How are we doing on lay swap with this team? So we don't have, so we basically are looking at Strange. That's the only player we would have in the second slate. So we literally can't do anything with late swap in this team, which isn't the end of the world. We're still kind of betting on that one game. I love the Saquon leverage play. Whoever suggested that, I think that was the path here. I think that was the path. We still, like, if Amon-Ra goes off, I think I can live with that. A 1% Saquon Barkley going for 200 yards. Not sure I can live with that. So I think that was sharp, whoever recommended that in the chat. The double tight end thing is something I don't think we've ever done on this show. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm leaving it. We're going double tight end for the first time in our history. I'll move Strange into the flex. Is this the $1 million team in the 555? Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Gibbs, bring back, Saquon Barkley for leverage, all those other running back plays on the wayside. We got Jamison Williams for some more leverage in this Detroit game. We got both the chalk tight ends in there. And we got Giants D against a chalky Michael Penix Jr. I think we've got enough leverage here, enough unique roster construction, all of those good things that we want to win a tournament of this size. Let's ride. Appreciate you guys. Week 16. We'll be back next week like we are every single week, 8 a.m. Central Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Appreciate everyone with us. Go subscribe to the newsletter if you want all of the prop bets early for free. There is a link in the description for that. Check out VIP. There's a link to VIP in the chat. Free VIP. Come check it out. See if it's for you. 7-day free trial. And appreciate you guys being with us on a Sunday morning. And I'll see you soon. Good talk.